Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
I was elbow deep in motorcycle grease when Danny stumbled through our apartment door at 7:30 Sunday morning, looking like she'd been hit by a freight train carrying tequila and bad decisions. Her designer weekend bag hung off one shoulder, her hair was a disaster, and she was wearing sunglasses indoors, like some washed-up celebrity trying to hide from the paparazzi. But it wasn't the hangover that caught my attention. It was the engagement ring, sparkling on her left hand like a goddamn lighthouse beacon. "Hey, babe," she mumbled, not making eye contact, as she kicked off her heels and left them scattered across our hardwood floor. "How was your weekend?" I wiped my hands on a shop rag and stood up from where I'd been working on my Harley in the living room. Yeah, I work on my bike indoors. It's my apartment, my rules, and Danny had stopped complaining about it months ago. Now I knew why. "Oh, I said, keeping my voice casual while my brain processed what I was seeing. Quiet, boring. Didn't get engaged to anyone, if that's what you're asking." She froze halfway to the kitchen, her back still turned to me. I could see her shoulders tense up under that expensive silk blouse she'd worn to her girls' weekend in Boston. The same blouse that was now wrinkled and stained with what looked like champagne. "Evan, we need to talk," she said, finally turning around and pulling off those ridiculous sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot and puffy, but there was something else there. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "No, we really don't," I replied, tossing the rag onto my workbench. "I figured it out already." That's when I saw her notice the suitcases. All three of them, packed neat and tidy, sitting by the front door like loyal dogs waiting for their owner to come home. Her face went white under that expensive makeup she was still wearing from whatever celebration she'd been at. "What are those?" she stammered. "Your stuff," I said, crossing my arms and leaning against my bike. "Well, most of it anyway. The rest is in Storage Unit 47 over on Maple Street. Here's the key." I tossed her a small silver key that landed at her feet with a tiny metallic clink. Danny stared at the key like it was a live grenade. "Evan, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Because it looks like my girlfriend of 3 years went on a girls' weekend and came back engaged to someone else. But hey, maybe I'm just crazy." She bent down and picked up the key with shaking fingers. When did you pack your stuff?" "Yesterday afternoon, right after Blake called here looking for his fiancée." I watched her face crumble as the lie fell apart in real time. Nice guy, by the way. Very chatty. Told me all about the romantic proposal on his yacht, the champagne, the works. Even described the ring. Looks exactly like the one you're wearing. Danny's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For someone who made a living in public relations, spinning stories and managing crises, she sure looked lost for words. "He doesn't know about me, does he?" I continued. "Blake thinks you've been single this whole time, living with your sick grandmother or some bullshit story like that." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The truth was written all over her guilty face. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, walking over to the kitchen counter and picking up a manila envelope I'd left there. "You're going to take your bags, drive to your parents' house, and break the good news about your engagement. While you're doing that, I'm going to have a little chat with Blake." I held out the envelope. She took it with trembling hands. "What's in here?" she whispered. "Everything," I said. "Photos of us together. Lease agreement with both our names on it. Utility bills. Bank statements showing you've been living here for 3 years. Oh, and my personal favorite, a copy of the vacation photos we took to Cabo last month. You know, the ones where you're wearing that tiny bikini and we're all over each other. Blake's going to love those." Danny's face went from white to green. "Evan, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake." "No," I said, opening the front door and holding it for her. "You made a choice. Several of them, actually. The mistake was mine, thinking you were someone worth trusting." She grabbed the suitcase handles and started dragging them toward the door. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back to me. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "I'm going to make sure Blake gets the whole story. After all, he deserves to know who he's marrying, don't you think?" As she struggled out the door with her bags, I called after her, "Oh, and Danny? Tell your parents I said congratulations. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear about their daughter's engagement to a man she's been cheating on for months. The door slammed shut behind her, and suddenly my apartment felt bigger and cleaner than it had in years. Mrs. Cray from apartment 2B was waiting in the hallway when I stepped out 20 minutes later, dressed in my best jeans and a clean shirt. The old woman had a talent for being in the right place at the right time to witness maximum drama, and this morning was no exception. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, clutching her little rat dog against her chest. I heard raised voices. "Just a minor relationship adjustment, Mrs. Cray," I said, locking my door. "Danny won't be living here anymore." Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Mrs. Cray lived for gossip the way some people lived for oxygen. Oh my. Well, I did notice she's been keeping some very late hours lately. And that expensive car that's been picking her up? Black BMW? I asked, though I already knew the answer. That's the one. Handsome driver, too. Older gentleman. Very well dressed. She leaned in conspiratorially. "I always wondered if you knew about him." "I do now," I said. "Thanks, Mrs. Cray." I headed downstairs to the parking garage where my truck was waiting. First stop, Tommy's auto shop on the south side of town. If I was going to war, I needed my best friend and former army buddy in my corner. Tommy Kowalski was under the hood of a beat-up Chevy when I walked into his shop. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, his face breaking into a grin that faded when he saw my expression. "Uh-oh," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "That's your someone's about to get their ass-kicked face?" "What happened?" "Danny's engaged," I said. "Congratulations." Tommy's grin returned. "Wait, why do you look like someone just killed your dog?" "Not to me, genius. To some rich asshole named Blake Moreau." Tommy's face went through several expressions before settling on anger. "Are you shitting me right now?" "Nope. Came home this morning wearing another man's ring. Tried to give me the 'we need to talk' speech." I already had her stuff packed. "How did you know?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. "Blake called yesterday looking for his fiancée. Described Danny perfectly, mentioned the ring, the whole thing. Apparently he's been trying to reach her all weekend, but her phone was going straight to voicemail. Because she was here with you," Tommy said, understanding dawning on his face. "Bingo." She told him she was going to visit her sick grandmother in Vermont. Meanwhile, she told me she was going on a girls' weekend to Boston. The truth is, she was on his yacht getting proposed to while texting me about how much she missed me. Tommy shook his head in disgust. "What a piece of work. So what's the plan?" "I need information on Blake Moreau. Everything you can dig up. Where he works, where he lives, what kind of car he drives, where he hangs out. I want to know this guy better than his own mother does." "Consider it done," Tommy said, already pulling out his phone. "My cousin Rick works for the city planning department. He can pull property records, business licenses, the works." While Tommy made his calls, I drove across town to Danny's gym. She'd been a member at Elite Fitness for 2 years, and I knew the staff pretty well, from dropping her off and picking her up. More importantly, I knew they had security cameras in the parking lot. The manager, a guy named Steve, who'd always been friendly, was working the front desk when I walked in. "Hey, Evan," he said. "Danny's not here. Isn't this her usual Sunday morning slot?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about," I said, leaning on the counter. "We broke up this morning, and I'm trying to figure out how long she's been seeing someone else. I know it sounds petty, but I need to know." Steve's expression shifted to sympathy. "Oh, man, I'm sorry, yeah. She's been getting picked up by some guy in a BMW for the past few months. Always waits in the parking lot for her. Any chance I could take a look at the security footage, just to confirm what I already suspect?" Steve glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "I shouldn't, but you've always been cool with me. Give me 5 minutes." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Steve's office, watching grainy black and white footage of Danny getting into Blake's BMW after her workouts. The timestamps went back 4 months. 4 goddamn months she'd been playing both of us. But the real kicker came when Steve fast-forwarded to last Tuesday. The footage showed Danny getting into the BMW as usual. But this time, Blake got out first, and they embraced in full view of the camera. It wasn't a friendly hug. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you're sleeping with. Jesus, Steve muttered. I had no idea she was still with you. She never mentioned a boyfriend. Can you burn this to a disc for me? I asked. Already on it, he said, sliding a DVD across the desk. Good luck, man. You deserve better. My phone buzzed as I was walking back to my truck. Text from Tommy. Got everything. Meet me at Murphy's Bar in an hour. You're going to love this. Murphy's Bar was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find in our neighborhood. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and a bartender who'd seen enough drama to write a book. Big Al Murphy had been running the place for 30 years, and he knew everyone's business whether they wanted him to or not. Tommy was already there when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth with a laptop open and a beer half finished. He looked up when I sat down, his expression somewhere between excited and pissed off. Blake Moreau, he said without preamble, age 42, CEO of Coastal Financial Solutions, lives in a $2 million condo downtown, drives a BMW M5, and according to my sources, is a grade A asshole. Tell me more about the asshole part, I said, signaling Al for a beer. Tommy turned the laptop around so I could see the screen. It showed a professional headshot of a man in an expensive suit with perfectly styled hair and the kind of smile that politicians practiced in mirrors. Rick did some digging, Tommy continued. Moreau's company has been under investigation by the state for predatory lending practices. He's been sued 3 times by former employees for workplace harassment. And get this, he's been engaged twice before in the past 5 years. Both times the engagements ended mysteriously with the women leaving town. Interesting, I said, taking a sip of my beer. What else? He's got a boat slip at the marina, plays golf at the country club every Saturday, and according to the gossip mill, he's been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his new fiancée. Apparently, he's been showing off pictures of Danny and telling people he stole her away from some loser. That last part made my jaw clench. He said that? Word for word, according to Rick's girlfriend, who works at the country club. Moreau was there yesterday celebrating with his golf buddies, talking about how easy it was to convince Danny to leave her dead-end boyfriend. I felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get before missions in Afghanistan, when everything became crystal clear and personal feelings got locked away in a box. There's more, Tommy said, pulling up another screen. I found his assistant's LinkedIn profile. Woman named Sam Martinez. She's been working for him for 3 years, and based on her social media posts, she's not exactly his biggest fan. What do you mean? Lots of passive-aggressive posts about toxic bosses and workplace bullies. Plus, she's been job hunting. Posted her resume on 3 different sites last month. I studied the photo of Sam Martinez, a professional-looking woman in her 30s, with tired eyes and a forced smile. She might be useful. That's what I was thinking, Tommy said. Someone who's fed up with Blake might be willing to share information. Big Al wandered over with my beer and lingered long enough to make it clear he was listening. Al had a policy of staying out of his customers' business unless it directly affected his bar, but he also had an encyclopedic knowledge of local drama. You boys talking about Blake Moreau? He asked, wiping down our already clean table. You know him? I asked. Al snorted. Know him? He comes in here sometimes with his business buddies, acting like he owns the place. Tips like shit and treats my waitresses like garbage. Last month he grabbed Jenny's ass and then had the balls to complain when she told him to keep his hands to himself. What happened? I told him he wasn't welcome here anymore. He threatened to have the place shut down. Said he had connections with the city council. Al's expression darkened. I told him where he could stick his connections. This was getting better by the minute. Al, what would you say if I told you Blake's been stealing someone's girlfriend and bragging about it? I'd say someone ought to teach him a lesson about respect, Al replied. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Tommy and I exchanged glances. Having Big Al on our side was like having Switzerland declare war on your enemies. Unexpected but potentially devastating. Al, if someone wanted to make sure Blake's dirty laundry got aired in public, hypothetically speaking, what would be the best way to do that? I asked. Al grinned, showing teeth that had seen better decades. Well, hypothetically, Blake's golf buddies come in here every Sunday night for poker. They love to gossip almost as much as they love to gamble. And hypothetically, if someone had some interesting information about Blake, those boys would spread it faster than wildfire. Good to know, I said. Hypothetically. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Sam Martinez. I got your number from Tommy's cousin. We should talk. Can you meet me at the Starbucks on Main Street in an hour? I showed the text to Tommy, who grinned like a shark. Looks like our boy Blake's assistant wants to have a conversation. This is moving fast, I said. The best revenge always does, Tommy replied. Strike while the iron's hot and your enemies are still underestimating you. He was right. Blake thought he'd won some kind of prize by stealing Danny away from a dead-end loser. He had no idea what was coming for him.
You wrote him love poems. In 10 years, you never wrote me a word.
It was emotional.
How is he telling in another?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
But Danny, she knew me better than that. She knew I didn't just roll over and take it when someone screwed me over, which meant she was probably sitting at her parents' house right now, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. Too bad for her, I was just getting started. Sam Martinez looked exactly like someone who'd been working for an asshole for 3 years. Professionally dressed, but tired around the edges, with the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived at Starbucks, nursing a coffee that had probably gone cold 20 minutes ago. Evan? She asked as I approached. That's me, I said, sitting down across from her. Thanks for reaching out. I wasn't sure I should, she admitted, glancing around nervously. But when Rick told me what Blake did to you, let's just say it fits his pattern. What do you mean? Sam pulled out her phone and scrolled through what looked like a notes app. Blake has a type, women who are already in relationships. He gets off on the challenge, the conquest. You're the third guy he's done this to in the past 2 years. That was news to me. He makes a habit of stealing other men's girlfriends? More than a habit. It's like a game to him. He specifically targets women who are living with someone, especially if the boyfriend is what he considers beneath her station. She made air quotes around the phrase. He's got a whole system worked out. Tell me about the system. Sam glanced around again, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. First, he identifies the target through social media or mutual friends. Then, he engineers a meeting, usually at some upscale event or through business connections. He plays the successful, sophisticated older man who can offer her a better life. And the boyfriend never finds out? Not until it's too late. Blake makes sure the woman keeps the relationship secret, usually by convincing her that her current boyfriend would become violent or vindictive if he found out. He positions himself as her protector. I felt my anger building, but I kept my voice level. What happened to the other guys? The first one never found out the truth. His girlfriend just left him for Blake, and he thought it was a normal breakup. They moved to California together, but the engagement ended 6 months later when Blake got bored. And the second guy? Sam's expression darkened. He found out about the affair and confronted Blake at his office. Blake had security throw him out and then got a restraining order against him. The guy lost his job. Blake has connections everywhere in this town. Last I heard, he'd moved away. But you're still willing to help me, I said. No, why? Because I'm done watching Blake destroy people for sport, she said firmly. And because I've been documenting everything for months, waiting for the right opportunity. She pulled a flash drive out of her purse and slid it across the table. Blake keeps detailed records of his conquests. Photos, text messages, even recordings of phone calls. He thinks it makes him look like some kind of master manipulator. But really it just makes him a sociopath. I pocketed the flash drive. What's on here? Everything about Danny, plus the 2 previous women. Dates, locations, methods he used to seduce them. Even his post-breakup analysis of what went wrong. He treats it like a business case study. Jesus, I muttered. There's also financial records, showing he's been using company money to fund his lifestyle. The yacht, the expensive dinners, the jewelry. The engagement ring he gave Danny, that was purchased with funds from the company's entertainment budget. This was better than I'd hoped. Sam, why haven't you gone to the authorities with this? Because Blake's lawyers are better than the local DA's office, and he's got half the city council in his pocket. But public humiliation? That's something his money can't fix. We spent the next hour going through Sam's intelligence on Blake. She'd been thorough. She knew his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses, and most importantly, his enemies. Apparently, Blake had made quite a few over the years. There's one more thing, Sam said as we prepared to leave. Blake's planning a big engagement party next weekend at the country club. He's invited everyone who matters in town. Business leaders, politicians, social elite. He wants to show off Danny like a trophy. Does Danny know about this? He mentioned it to her yesterday on the yacht, but I don't think she understood the scope. Blake's treating this like a campaign event. He's even hired photographers. Perfect. A public venue with all of Blake's peers in attendance. It would be like Christmas morning. Sam, I need one more favor, I said. Can you make sure I get an invitation to that party? She smiled for the first time since we'd started talking, and this time it reached her eyes. Consider it done. Blake always tells me to pad the guest list with interesting local personalities. I think you qualify. As I drove home, my phone rang. Danny's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message while sitting in my truck outside my apartment building. Evan, please call me back. I know you're angry, but we need to talk about this like adults. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to ruin everything. Blake doesn't mean anything to me. You're the one I love. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I deleted the message and headed upstairs. Danny was scared, which meant she was starting to realize the magnitude of what she'd done. But it was too late for damage control. The wheels were already in motion. Mrs. Cray was lurking in the hallway again when I reached my floor. That girl of yours came by an hour ago, she said without preamble, crying her eyes out, begging me to let her into your apartment. What did you tell her? I told her you'd changed the locks and that she should have thought about that before she started running around with other men. Mrs. Cray looked pleased with herself. Then I told her about the expensive car I've been seeing and how the whole building's been talking about her carrying on. The whole building? Oh, yes, dear. We all knew something was going on. A woman doesn't start dressing that fancy and staying out all night unless there's another man involved. We were just waiting to see how long it would take you to figure it out. Great. I'd been the last to know about my own girlfriend's affair. But at least now I had an entire building full of witnesses to Danny's infidelity. Mrs. Cray, if anyone asks, reporters, investigators, whatever, you'll tell them the truth about what you saw? Absolutely, dear. That girl made her bed. Now she can lie in it. With whoever she wants, apparently. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside. The place felt different without Danny's stuff cluttering every surface. Cleaner, quieter. Like I could finally breathe again. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Blake showed up at my apartment Tuesday evening, just as I'd hoped he would. I'd been watching from my window when the black BMW pulled into the parking garage, and I was already at my door when he knocked. He looked exactly like his photos, expensive suit, perfect hair, and an expression that suggested he thought he was doing me a favor by gracing me with his presence. What the photos hadn't captured was the arrogance that radiated from him like cologne. You must be Evan, he said when I opened the door. I'm Blake Moreau. I believe we have something to discuss. Sure, come on in, I said, stepping aside. Can I get you a beer, coffee, glass of water? He looked around my apartment with barely concealed disdain, taking in the motorcycle in the living room, the mismatched furniture, and the general blue-collar aesthetic. No, thank you. This won't take long. Have a seat, I offered, gesturing to my couch. Blake remained standing, clearly wanting to maintain the power dynamic. Look, I know this is awkward, but I want you to know I have no hard feelings about the situation with Daniela. Daniela? I raised an eyebrow. She goes by Danny. Not anymore, he said with a smile that was probably meant to be charming, but came across as smug. Daniela is a much more sophisticated name, don't you think? More appropriate for someone in her new position. I nodded thoughtfully. And what position is that? My fiancé, of course, soon to be my wife. He held up his left hand, showing off a wedding band I hadn't noticed before. We're planning a Christmas wedding. Congratulations, I said. When did you two meet? About 4 months ago at a charity gala downtown. She was there with some girlfriends and we just clicked immediately. Sometimes you know when you found your soulmate, you know? 4 months ago. Right around the time Danny had started working late more often and going to more networking events. I had to admire Blake's ability to rewrite history on the fly. That's a beautiful story, I said. I'm sure her parents were thrilled when she brought you home. Something flickered across Blake's face. Confusion, maybe, or concern. Well, we've been keeping things private. You know how it is with high-profile relationships. Oh, absolutely. Privacy is so important. I walked over to my kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder. Speaking of privacy, I think there might be some confusion about Danny's living situation. What do you mean? I opened the folder and pulled out a copy of our lease agreement. This is our rental agreement for this apartment. Signed 3 years ago. Both our names are on it, and we've been splitting the rent 50-50 ever since. Blake's confident expression faltered as he looked at the document. That can't be right. Daniela told me she was living with her grandmother. Her grandmother died 2 years ago, I said gently. We went to the funeral together. Nice service. I have photos if you'd like to see them. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through pictures. Danny and me at the funeral, at family dinners, on vacation, at friends' weddings. 3 years of documented coupledom that Blake couldn't explain away. This doesn't make sense, Blake said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Why would she lie to me? Maybe because she's been playing both of us, I suggested. Here, look at this. I showed him the security footage from the gym, the timestamps clearly visible. Blake watched himself picking up Danny after her workouts, his face growing paler with each kiss and embrace. She's been living here with me while dating you, I continued. Sleeping in my bed Sunday through Thursday, then spending weekends on your yacht. Pretty impressive scheduling, actually. Blake sank onto my couch, the folder of evidence scattered around him. I don't understand. She said she loved me. She accepted my proposal. I'm sure she did. Danny's always been practical about these things. You've got money, status, connections, everything a girl could want. I'm just a guy who owns a gym and works on motorcycles in his living room. You own a gym? Blake looked up, surprised. 3 of them, actually. But I don't like to brag. I sat down across from him. Look, Blake, I'm not here to fight with you. We're both victims in this situation. What do you mean? I leaned forward, adopting a conspiratorial tone. Think about it. Danny's been lying to both of us for months. She's been taking money from me for rent and utilities while letting you pay for her dinners, her clothes, her jewelry. She's been getting the benefits of 2 relationships without the commitment of either one. Blake's face was cycling through emotions, confusion, anger, hurt, and something that looked like embarrassment. But she said yes when I proposed. She seemed so happy. Of course she did. You proposed on a yacht with a ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. What was she going to say? No? I pulled out another document, Danny's credit card statements that I'd printed from our shared account. Look at these charges from last weekend. Spa treatments, shopping, expensive dinners. All while she was supposedly visiting her sick grandmother in Vermont. Blake studied the statements, his jaw tightening as he recognized the locations and amounts. These are all from Boston, from the hotel where we stayed. Right. She was with you, spending your money, while texting me about how much she missed me and couldn't wait to get home. I showed him some of the messages Danny had sent me over the weekend. Look at the timestamps. Blake read the messages, his face growing darker with each one. Messages sent while they were having dinner, while they were on his yacht. Even one sent an hour after he'd proposed to her. I can't believe this, he muttered. Blake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Has Danny ever mentioned wanting to keep your relationship secret? Maybe said something about me being dangerous or unstable? His eyes widened. How did you know that? Because it's part of her pattern. She told you I was some kind of psycho who would lose it if I found out about you, right? Maybe get violent or try to hurt her. She said you had anger issues, That you'd threatened her before when she tried to break up with you. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Blake, look around this apartment. Do you see any signs of violence? Any holes in the walls, broken furniture, anything that suggests I'm some kind of maniac? He looked around, taking in the neat, organized space. No, but nothing. Danny played us both. She kept me thinking she was faithful, while keeping you thinking she was available. And she did it so well that neither of us suspected the other existed until now. Blake stood up abruptly, pacing to my window and staring out at the parking lot. What am I supposed to do now? I announced our engagement to everyone. I've got a party planned for this weekend. That's up to you, I said. But if I were you, I'd want to know the whole truth before I married someone. What do you mean, the whole truth? I hesitated as if debating whether to tell him something. Blake, I don't want to hurt you more than you're already hurting, but you might not be the only other guy. His head snapped around. What? Danny's been getting a lot of phone calls lately from someone named Marcus. Always steps out of the room to take them. Says it's work-related. But she doesn't work with anyone named Marcus. I was lying through my teeth, but Blake was too rattled to think clearly. The seed of doubt I'd planted was already growing. How many others do you think there are? He asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe none. Maybe more. The point is, do you really want to marry someone who's capable of this level of deception? Blake was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at his BMW. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and flat. She made me look like a fool. She made us both look like fools, I corrected. The question is, what are we going to do about it?